49, continuing our series we've been looking at over the last several weeks. We just usually call this Summer Psalms, and we're looking at our in the order. Again, not going in order in the sense that we're looking at them each one, but we are looking at particular Psalms from Book 2, which encompasses Psalm 42 through 72. So as you have opportunity to read those over the summer, I would encourage you just to familiarize yourself with them. Psalm 49 is a bit different, though you're going to recognize the author as we look at as we kind of look at the prescript there. It says it is by the sons of Korah. And so we've already looked at several psalms that were written by the sons of Korah. If you're not familiar, Korah was one of the men who led the rebellion against Moses in Exodus. Right? So his sons are now worship leaders within the context of the people of God. And that's encouraging in a sense, I think, because although Korah was swallowed up for his rebellion, his children did not follow him in that rebellion. And in fact, they're going to be used mightily as people, particularly the Korahites, are gatekeepers. They're the ones who guard the temple, and they guard the worship of God. You've maybe are familiar with the psalm. It says, "Better is one day in your house than thousands elsewhere." Psalm 80-something off the top of my head. I'm missing it. But the Korahites were those who wrote those words as people who were at the gates at all times and said there's nothing better than being in the house of God. So that's who wrote Psalm 49. So they get some intricate insight into what it looks like to be in the presence of God and seeing the people of God come into the presence of God. But in doing so, they get insight into the world and what the world is like and how people think. And so Psalm 49 is going to help us in that regard. What I'd like to do is read the psalm, and then I want to ask. And I want to ask the kids, and I want to ask the teenagers first, what is Psalm 49 about? Now, I think at this point, everybody is well aware that the word psalms means what? Songs. Specifically, songs that are sung to stringed instruments, right? So that's what the Psalms are. They were meant to be used in the context of worship. And so I want to read Psalm 49. So you guys listen, and I want to ask you, just listen, what is this psalm about, okay? And if the kids and the teenagers don't have it, then I'll move on to the adults, so you can't tune out, okay? All right, to the choir master, a psalm of the sons of Korah. Hear this, O peoples. Give ear, all inhabitants of the world, both low and high, rich and poor together. My mouth shall speak wisdom. The meditation of my heart shall be understanding. I will incline my ear to a proverb. I will solve my riddle to the music of the lyre. Why should I fear in times of trouble, when the iniquity of those who cheat me surrounds me, those who trust in their wealth and boast in the abundance of their riches? Truly, no man can ransom another or give God the price of his life, for the ransom of their life is costly and can never suffice, that he should live on forever and never see the pit. For he sees that even the wise die. The fool and the stupid alike must perish and leave their wealth to others. Their graves are their homes forever, their dwelling places to all generations. Though they called lands by their own names, man in his pomp will not remain. He is like the beasts that perish. This is the path of those who have foolish confidence, yet after them people approve of their boasts. Like sheep, they are appointed for Sheol. Death shall be their shepherd, and the upright shall rule over them in the morning. Their form shall be consumed in Sheol, with no place to dwell. But God will ransom my soul from the power of Sheol, for he will receive me. Be not afraid when a man becomes rich, when the glory of his house increases. For when he dies, he will carry nothing away. His glory will not go down after him. For though while he lives, he counts himself blessed, and though you get praise when you do well for yourself, his soul will go to the generation of his fathers who will never again see light. Man in his pomp, yet without understanding, is like the beasts that perish. All right, so load of information there from the psalmist. Question, all right, we'll start kids, teenagers. What do you think this psalm is about? Anybody? Did you hear anything run through, any particular themes that stood out? All right. Yeah, Charlie? That's all right. That's okay. That happens to all of us. Yeah, Emma. Oh, that was good. You can't take your riches to the grave. All right, that's a huge theme of Psalm 49. Right. In fact, I would say it's one of the primary themes of the psalm. So great job, Emma. What we're thinking about tonight is particularly relevant to us culturally. Right. So you need to listen and heed the word. So what Emma just said is really important. You can't take your riches to the grave. Anything else, adults, anybody that stood out theme-wise, you're like, okay, this is important for us to see as we look at this psalm together. Yeah, absolutely, right? Yeah. What does it profit a man if he gain the whole world and lose his own soul? In fact, we're going to hear a lot of the words of Christ from Psalm 49 as we work our way through. I think we'll be able to pull some of these out. Some of the parables that Jesus told probably came directly from Psalm 49. Okay. All right. So it is unique and a little different than what we have seen thus far. Outline-wise, I would just break it down into three parts. Right? Verses 1 through 4, there is a call to hear. Right? There's a call to hear. And then within that, there's a question that's going to be answered. That's verses 5 and 6. All right? So a call to hear and question to answer in verses 1 through 6. But then, secondly, in verses 7 through 12 and 16 through 18, there's counsel to heed. Counsel to heed. And then lastly, in verses 13 through 15 and verses 19 to 20, there's a contrast to take to heart. All right, so for those of you note takers, that's the outline. And you can see we're going to take these sections and we're going to kind of jump around a little bit. So don't worry, we're going to hit it all, but we're going to move. So let's begin with verses 1 through 4. Hear this, O peoples, give ear, all inhabitants of the world, both low and high, rich and poor, together. This is the call to hear. It is a universal call, right? You can hear that. He says, rich and poor, right? Low and high. That's everybody, right? Everybody in between. I need you to listen up. This is a message for every single person. He says, my mouth shall speak wisdom. The meditation of my heart shall be understanding. I will incline my ear to a proverb. I will solve my riddle to the music of the lyre. I love that, right? He's like, I'm gonna break this down musically for you. Right? I'm going to answer this question with my lyre. And so he's going to sing a song, but the song is meant to answer this big question. And the words he uses here are significant. He uses words like wisdom and understanding. That's not what we typically associate with Psalms, right? What do you associate wisdom and understanding with? Solomon, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, right? Those are typically words that we see in that wisdom literature. So Psalm 49 falls squarely in that category. It is a wisdom psalm. He says here, I am going to what? I'm going to incline your ear to a proverb. Right? I'm going to give you a proverb. And a proverb simply is, it means to lay beside, literally. It's contrasting these two things. You saw it at the very end of the last line of the psalm. In verse 20, he says, man in his pomp, yet without understanding, is like, right? That's the proverb, right? He's laying it beside, right? Man without understanding is like the beast that perish, right? The foolish man is no different than an animal, right? That's the proverb. All right? So we're going to look at this wisdom that the psalmist has to offer. Right? He's going to share with us tonight some insight into life. And Proverbs they're not just knowledge, right? Knowledge is knowing truth. Right? Proverbs here's how you apply that truth. How you can live skillfully with wisdom and understanding. And so this is going to be a truth that we're going to see. And I think even some of the things we talked about already, like these are not hard things. Everybody knows this, right? Everybody knows this. These are simple things, but they are good for us to be reminded of. And so that's what the psalmist wants to do. He's going to answer the riddle. He's going to answer the question. You say, well, what's the question? The question's in verse 5 and 6. Why should I fear in times of trouble? When the iniquity of those who cheat me surrounds me, those who trust in their wealth and boast of the abundance of their riches. And then down in verse 16, he says, be not afraid when a man becomes rich, when the glory of his house increases. So he's talking about fear, he said, why should I be afraid? What is he afraid of? Or what is he saying the fear is? The fear for those is there are wealthy people who are abusing their wealth. They are wicked men who are cheating those in vulnerable positions, and they're getting their gain at the expense of others. Do you hear that? Right? Why should I fear when the iniquity of those who cheat me surround me? These are men who trust in their wealth, and they boast in their abundance. This is something that we see. This is not new, right? This is what had Asaph struggling in Psalm 73. Right? Why do the wicked, why do they prosper? Right? And he was really struggling with that. But this is something we see not just throughout the scriptures, but we see it everywhere in life, don't we? Right? Rich, wealthy, taking advantage, abusing their power and abusing their wealth to take advantage of those who cannot help themselves. And so here he says, why should I fear when those kind of things happen? Now, I can think in my mind of all kinds of reasons why you would fear. And even when I say that, it's really difficult for us, right? Because we live in a very different culture. Imagine you lived in a culture where you really had no course of action, right? In our culture, if somebody takes advantage of you, you have some recourse, right? You have some outlets that you have some rights. But there are cultures still today in which if there are those who are wealthy and power are abusing that power, you have no rights and no recourse. Right? If they want your land, they take your land. If they want your house, they take your house. If they want your wife or your daughter, they take your wife or your daughter. This is how life works for them in the world. They have no recourse. And here the psalmist says, why should I fear in times like that? Now that takes it to a different level, right? He's saying when there are those who abuse their power, you do not have to be afraid. And the question is, why? Why do you not have to fear? Now we're going to look at it, and we're going to get the answer. We'll really see it at the end. But in the meantime, as he unpacks this problem, what I want you to see is there's a lot of misconceptions about money and material possessions, right? And this is going to be really helpful for us in a materialistic culture. I think we would all agree. People are nodding their head, right? We live in a very materialistic culture. And if we would say that doesn't impact us, I would call you a liar. I just would, right? Because I don't know anyone, myself included, who's not impacted by the materialistic mindset that we find today. All right, so what I want to do is, as we walk through this, is I want to see some misconceptions. This is wisdom, right? This is how do I look at the world? How do I look at life? How do I apply this truth? We'll come back to the question, why do I not have to be afraid? But let's go down to verse 16 and 17. Right? Misconception number 1. Be not afraid when a man becomes rich, when the glory of his house increases. For when he dies, he will carry nothing away. His glory will not go down after him. Now that's the verse that Emma pulled out, right? She said, you can't take your riches with you. And she's right on the money, right? But what you need to hear here, what's the misconception? The misconception is that money and material possessions will make me secure. That you are safe if you have money and material things. Right? That's the misconception. Right? So financial independence is the goal, right? To get to a place where you do not have to depend on anyone or anything. Now, we know that more often than not, those who have financial wealth and material things, do they feel secure? No, right? It's never, ever enough. In fact, you have all this and you're worried about what's going to happen to all of this. Now, more often than not, that's what happens. And I know, maybe you're sitting here and you're going, Pastor, you don't have to worry about that because I don't have all that stuff. So I'm just not, that's not me. But listen, you don't have to have all the stuff to fall into this trap. You just have to have the desire for all of that stuff, right? You can desire, like if I just had that, then I would be secure, right? If I had that job, if I had that house, then I would feel safe. Then I would be satisfied. What are you trusting in? What is it that you're really trusting in when you think like that? Right? We said what? It sounds like Jesus, right? What if it profit a man if he gained the whole world and lose his own soul? How about Sermon on the Mount? Matthew 6, right? Store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moth and rust do not destroy, right? Don't store up for yourself treasures on earth, right? That stuff is what? It doesn't last, right? It doesn't last. Man, I'm going to tell you what. It's easy to fall into this trap, isn't it? To feel like if I just had that, then I would be secure. But hear the wisdom of the psalm tonight. You can't take any of it with you. You've heard the old saying, right? You've never seen a U-Haul behind a hearse. Right? That's this verse, right? You just can't. The Vikings and the Egyptians, they tried it, right? They buried their treasure with them, and guess what? They're digging it up, right? They didn't take it with them. You can't keep it. So Jesus says, no, store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. The whole kingdom of God runs on a different currency than the rest of the world. One of our memory verses, one of our fighter verses this year, it has come to me again and again and again. I have needed it over and over. Hebrews 13, 5 and 6, it says what? Keep your life free from love of money and be content with what you have. Right? Now, that's not the end of the verse, right? He keeps going. He says what? For he has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. So I can confidently say, I will not fear. Why? Why does he not fear? Because the Lord is my helper. Now there's the question, right? There's the question. Where's my trust? Where do I find my security? Where do I find my safety? The author of Hebrews says what? The Lord is my helper, I will not fear. What can man do to me? That's where we find our trust. That's where we find our security. That's where we find our safety. But there's a lie out there that says true safety and security is found in money and material things. Right? You learn this very quickly, right? When the stock market shifts, right, and you see your 401k go, you're just like, oh, what am I trusting in, right? And so we get to check our heart here tonight. So then, secondly, I would say a second misconception we see in verse 18. For though while he lives, he counts himself blessed. All right, that word blessed, we know, it means happy. It means happy. Right? So money and material possessions will make me happy. That's the lie, right? That's the misconception. Again, very easy to fall into this trap. We went camping last month for the first time this year, and every single time I go into a campground, I have to wash my heart. Like, boy, that's a nice truck. Well, that camper that's a lot nicer than my camper. Right? Oh, look at that boat that they're pulling behind. I mean, there are people who are pulling vehicles that are nicer than my truck behind their camper. And I was just like, what in the world? And so all of a sudden I'm going, if I had that, then we would be happy, right? You play that game? No, you guys don't do that, do you? We do, right? We feel like if I just had that, then I would be happy. Right? And this is the misconception, right? He's talking here in verses 16 and verse 18 to those who are trusting in their riches. And they're saying what? Well, I count myself blessed. Look at all that I have. I'm happy. I think one of the best, I like to turn on the radio and listen to, I feel like it's just some of the best cultural commentary, right? It's modern day philosophers in my estimation, right? They're just telling me what people think. And I remember several years back, I heard a song on the radio. I want you to know, I'm not commending this song in any way. In fact, I don't think you should listen to it. I'm just going to mention it because I feel like it's a great commentary on the culture. I was listening to the radio, and it just caught my attention. There's this girl, she's singing, I want it, I got it. I want it, I got it. Now, some of you are going, I know that song, right? And I heard it on the radio, so it was radio version. I'm like, I need to go look up the lyrics to this song. And I did, and I was like, oh, that's a song you should not listen to, all right? It's got terrible, filthy language, not on the radio, but just, anyway, Ariana Grande is a modern-day philosopher, right? She says this. She goes, whoever said money can't solve your problems must not have had enough money to solve them. Right? Now that's a modern-day mindset, right? If you have enough money, there's no problem you can't solve. Now, the psalmist is going to disagree here in just a moment, right? And you're going to hear it. You're going to see it. But she said what? There's no amount of money that is, if you got enough money, it'll solve your problems. What's the psalmist say? You'll be careful, right? Money is not going to buy you happiness. Now, again, country artist Chris Janson, I find this song clever. He just says, he says this. He says, I know what they say, money can't buy happiness. Maybe so, but it could buy me a boat. Right? And so what's the mindset? Yeah. And the truth is, money and material possessions can bring happiness. Right? For a time. For a time. Right? It's short-lived. It's temporary, and you know it. Right? It's nice to get things. There's some things like you're like, if I just had that, I'd be happy. Then you get it, and you're like, oh, it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. Or it was what you thought it was going to be for about 5 minutes. And then you move on to the next thing, right? Because the eye is never satisfied. The culture would have us believe that he who dies with the most toys wins. And the psalmist would say what? He who dies with the most toys still dies. Still dies. That's just the reality here. And so there's a third misconception in verse 18. And he says, and though you get praise when you do well for yourself. You get praise when you do well. What's he saying here? Money and material possessions will make you important, right? It'll make you, right? You're going to find your identity in those things, right? So here's how I would explain it, right? I am what I own, right? Where I live, the car I drive, the clothes that I wear determine my value as a person. Now, people think like that, right? I live in this neighborhood. This is the neighborhood of this kind of people, right? And I drive this kind of car. And I wear these kind of clothes. And those things make me who I am. And because I have the house and I have the car and I live in that neighborhood and I wear these clothes, then I'm happy. I'm someone. I'm important. Now, every single advertiser knows we think like that, right? So they'll show you somebody unhappy or unsuccessful, and then they'll put them in their car or they'll put them in their clothes, and all of a sudden they're happy and successful. And we believe it. We believe it. But it's a misconception. It's a lie. Keeping up with the Joneses will never satisfy you. You'll always be chasing. And again, I think Jesus had Psalm 49 in mind when he wrote Luke chapter 12, or whenever he spoke what we read. I'm going to turn there, Luke 12. Luke chapter 12. Let me start in this is familiar territory, I think. Verse 13. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Right? What does he want? He wants money, right? I want my money, right? But he said, "Man, who made me a judge or arbitrator over you?" And he said to them, "Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." Right? What does Jesus say? Money and material possessions are not what's most important. And he told them a parable. Right? He said, "The land of a rich man produced plentifully, and he thought to himself, 'What shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops.' He said, 'I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry.'" Right? I've got it made. This is the good life, right? I have the money. I have the material things. I'm going to enjoy it all. Verse 20, but God said to him, "Fool, this night your soul is required of you. And the things you have prepared, whose will they be?" Do you hear that? You can't take your riches with you. Right? Jesus is saying the exact same thing the psalmist said in chapter 49. You can't take it with you. These things are not what's ultimately going to make you happy. Let's go back to Psalm 49. Why? Here's the answer. I'm going to go to verse 7 through 9. Verse 7 of chapter 49. Why will these things not make us happy in the end? Truly, no man can ransom another or give to God the price of his life. For the ransom of their life is costly and can never suffice. And he should live on forever and never see the pit. All right. Now, what's the psalmist saying here? No amount of money can save your soul. No amount of money. No man can ransom another or give to God a price for his life. Men would love this. Right? Men have tried this. Right? Famous French philosopher Voltaire. If you took a philosophy class, you read Voltaire. Right? He was a staunch atheist, leader in the Renaissance in the 18th century, and he was well known. Hated Christians, hated Christianity, hated God, wrote a book about it called Candide. But guess what? Voltaire was a very wealthy man. And on his deathbed, he begged and pleaded with his physician. He asked his doctor in desperation. He said, "I will give you half of all I possess for 6 months more of life." Just 6 more months. He said, I'll give you half of what I have. The doctor couldn't take it because he can't grant it, right? So with all of that wisdom, Voltaire had to meet his maker. He was going to stand before God. He couldn't take any of it with him, and he had no amount of money that he had could save him. This is an important contrast, right? No man can ransom another. No man can ransom. You can't help somebody else when it comes to their soul, when it comes to their life. Why? Verses 10 and 11. For he sees that even the wise die. The fool and the stupid alike must perish and leave their wealth to others. Their graves are their homes forever, their dwelling place to all generations. Though they called lands by their own names, man in his pomp will not remain. He is like the beasts that perish. Right. Just going back to the beginning of the psalm, he says, hear everyone, high and low, rich and poor, right? Listen up. This is universal truth. Everybody dies. Everybody dies. All right? This is, I know we got kids in here. You're going, Pastor, why are you talking to them like this? This is just truth, right? This is true, right? Death is no respecter of persons. It is appointed unto man once to die. And James chapter 4 says, life is a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. Everybody dies. And it doesn't matter how great you are or how important you are or how powerful you are or how much money you have, one day your time will come. You'll keep that appointment. That all day long in my mind, it says man in his pomp will not remain. Right? My mind goes to Herod in Acts chapter 12. Right? Herod's got this big old party and this big celebration. Everybody's just worshiping him. And he takes all the credit, and he takes all the glory, and God says, that's it. And Herod drops over dead. He says the worms ate him, right? No different than an animal laying out. And this is the point, right? Man in his pomp, just like the beasts that perish. So what's the important contrast here? Let's look at it, and we'll finish. Verse 13, 14, and verses 19 and 20 are going to contrast with verse 15 right in the heart, right? So these surround it. Right? So he says, this is the path of those who have foolish confidence, yet after them people approve of their boast. What is the path? The path is they're going to be like the fools. Right? So he says they are like sheep appointed for Sheol. Death shall be their shepherd, and the upright shall rule over them in the morning. Their form shall be consumed in Sheol with no place to dwell. Verse 19, his soul will go to the generation of his fathers who will never again see light. Right, this is the end. And this is the end of who? Those who have foolish confidence. Those who trust in themselves, those who trust in their money, those who trust in their material things. They do not trust in God. They do not, right? The fool has said in his heart, Psalm 14, there is no God. The foolish confidence leads where? Not just death. That's true for everyone, right? It's appointed unto man once to die. Right? The wage of sin is death. Right? This is a reality for every single human being. But here it says they lead to the grave from which they will never again see light. So that's not just physical death, right? We're talking now about spiritual death. We're talking about separation from God. Why? Because they trust in themselves, they trust in their riches, and they do not trust in God. And it leads to hell. It leads to hell. Those who trust in money and material possessions are fools. And it says what? Death is their shepherd. That's a weird picture, isn't it? Right? We think of a shepherd as someone who is, right? Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. I think the contrast is important here, right? You can have the Lord as your shepherd, or death is your shepherd. That's it. Right? And the shepherd of death leads you not to still waters, but to death and darkness. That will be their end. What's the contrast to keep the heart? Verse 15, but God. That's always good, right? That contrast is always important. But God will ransom my soul from the power of Sheol. That word Sheol means the grave, right? He will ransom my soul from the power of the grave. He will receive me. Darkness is not my end. I get to be with God, and God is light. Right? And in him is no darkness at all. I can be with God. Why? Because he will ransom me. Don't trust in yourself. Don't trust in money. Don't trust in material things. Trust in God. Now, I don't think for a moment the psalmist fully understood the redemption that is possible. We get to look back on the fullness of the redemption that we have in Christ. But they had a hope, right? They had a hope that God would redeem and rescue, that he would send a Messiah who would save them from the curse of death in the grave. And he says here, those who trust in him, he will receive. That's the same language that was used of Enoch all the way back in Genesis chapter 5. He will be received by God. Enoch what? He escaped death. And that's true for all of us. I know, right? For none of man wants to die, but what did Jesus say? I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me shall never die. Never die, right? Because the moment we take our last breath here, those who are in Christ open their eyes to the glory of Christ, to be absent from the body, to be present with the Lord. So listen, here's the wisdom for tonight. You will either leave this world with God, or you will leave this world with nothing. That's it. That's it. That's your option. Now, we can hear the language of Christ, right? Store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. We can hear the words of Christ. What shall it profit a man if he gain the whole world and lose his own soul? But brothers and sisters, it's wise for us to think like this. It's wise for us to remember, right? I know over the years we've mentioned Jonathan Edwards. We've talked about his resolutions. If you've not read them, I'd encourage you to look them up. They are filled with wisdom for a man of 20 years of age who just I'm resolved to live like this. Now, I'm sure, like all of us, he struggled to keep those resolutions. But the resolutions were good. And in one of them, he said, I am resolved to think much on all occasions of my dying and of the common circumstances which attend death. I'm going to think much about the reality that I'm going to die. That's wise. That's wise. Right? If we live like that, we're not going to be so caught up in the here and now. Right? Set your mind on things above, not on things of the earth, brothers and sisters. Store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. Don't store up for yourself treasures on earth. Because why? You can't take it with you. You can't take it with you. Any comments or questions before we finish up tonight? Again, the redemption, the true salvation that is possible here in verse 15, so that God will receive me, is only possible through Jesus Christ. He paid the price. Now, going back, right, verse 7, no man can ransom another. No man can ransom another. But Jesus was not just any man. He was the God-man, and he paid the ransom for you and for me and for anyone who will believe. All right, let's close in prayer.